Hello, this is the Blast Report podcast on all things blasting. My name is Evan Thibaud with New Wave Consulting, and I want to thank all the drill and blast teams along with those supporting them who are out there on the pattern. The production team at Blast Think and I would like to welcome you to today's episode of the Blast Report podcast. Today's episode is sponsored by Stemlock. Are you looking to improve your blasting? Whether you're trying to reduce your blasting costs or you're experiencing challenging geology, Stemlock has an array of blaster-friendly products with solutions you're looking for. Whether you're trying to seal voids, air deck blasting, prevent stemming dilution, or block groundwater intrusion, these are just a few of the solutions that they can provide. Go to stemlock.com and start a trial today. Joe, we got you back for part 2 of the Blast Report podcast. So there was a mention at the beginning where you said after you went from Beaver dams, you were doing some demolitions.
Yes.
Now, what kind of demolitions were you doing? This was this out in Montana area, in Wyoming, or what?
It started in Montana and Wyoming. I was doing taking some old bridges out. Eventually, I was asked to take a 200-foot smokestack down in the Burlington Northern rail yard. That was quite of a challenge because it had to go northwest. It couldn't go north and it couldn't go west. And certainly behind it was power line. So it was a little bit touchy, and it was my first experience at doing that. So in demolition, what I found is, and I've done a fair amount of it over the years, is you don't sleep well the night before, you know.
I could imagine.
And then I got to doing, I took out, I think, a series of like 14 bridges for the railroad over about a 3-year span, which was interesting because the coal trains primarily were beating up the old 2 and 3 span bridges. And so what they'd do is take them out and replace it with culverts, big concrete precast culverts. And it worked out real well because I would go visit the site and they did the drilling for me. And so I would give them a diagram and mark up the piers and the abutments. And they would have it all drilled out. And then on shoot day, I would show up early, and there would usually be one final train that would go through at about 7 o'clock. And after that went, they had cranes on each end come in, pick up the track itself, and expose the piers and what I needed to do, and shoot it, and then leave. Some of the old piers were originally big canisters, about 3 foot in diameter, about 3/8 half-inch thick steel. And then in the 20s, they actually encased the whole thing in what they called a bullet or a boat, and it was all concrete. And so what was interesting about that is when you would shoot that, because it was structural steel inside, and you would throw, at one time we had traffic stopped because of the highway, and the little gal.
The highway would be next to the railroad track?
Railroad, okay. Yeah, which is typical in Montana and most states, really. Yeah. And I went to turn the flag people loose, and she's sitting there throwing the head of a rivet up and catching it in her hand. I said, "Where'd that come from?" And she was a half a mile away. And she said, "Well, after the explosion, I saw this little black thing keep coming at me, and it made it within about a couple of 100 feet of her.
Whoa.
Was the head of a rivet. So you move people back further, you know, when you turn that stuff loose.
Absolutely.
And over the years, I've taken out several structures. Just this last summer, a year ago, we dropped 4 dragline booms.
Whoa.
That were being polished, yeah.
Well, the end of an era, huh, Joe?
Yeah, and it's kind of a sad thing, really.
What were the names? They had the names of the draglines, Big Joe, Big Bertha.
Yeah, some of those had Indian names on them, you know, Navajo names. And in my career, I've officially killed 8 draglines.
Whoa.
Over the years. It's just faster and cheaper to drop the boom than it is to lower them conventionally.
Now, I've heard that a lot of them are moving down, I guess the smaller ones are moving down towards right west of Miami for that underwater limestone type blasting.
Yeah, I think there was a couple of them moved out of New Mexico that were 65-yard units that went down there. Yeah, a little more mobile.
Mm-hmm. What's that like shooting down the image of that? You know, you said it's a little sad, but is it pretty? I mean, can you walk me through the process of, you know, you're probably the last ones in there, right? Reclamation team is waiting right behind you to. Do they bury it, or do they break it down and recycle all that metal? I would hope, right?
A little of both. I actually, back probably 15 years ago, they walked 2 of them down into a pit, and I shot the entire A-frame off on those, and they buried them.
Just buried.
And those were 85-yard machines. The last 4 that we did were dismantled, and they had a whole crew of guys come in, and their cutting torches were 6 feet long.
Whoa.
Propane and liquid oxygen, and they would tear up a dragline in no time. You know, they
like termites.
They were getting right after them. Yeah.
I always thought it'd be cool to have one of those shovels, or, you know, if you leave the outer shell and turn it into one of those Airbnbs, you know, yeah. You know, I bet a lot of people would like to spend one night in an old shovel, or a drag line itself. You know, you could turn a swimming pool out of some of those buckets.
Oh yeah.
Was it fairly easy blasting when it comes to shooting those? I mean, you're just using linear shaped charges on the boom, or you're cutting the cables first, or the cables cut in advance and then you're just dropping the boom?
All at the same time. Mm-hmm. Sometimes on the boom, what I would do would be, I developed a system to cut cable. Cable's extremely hard to cut. And I finally developed a system. It works real well with John Sunday. I don't know if you know John. Yep. And bright guy, fun to work with. And but we always got our shape charges through him. And then I would oftentimes cut the cable, and then several milliseconds later, actually hit the boom with the shape charges.
Wow. And so is John still in the business? Is he still doing work like that?
Well, his company is. He bought a place up in Red Lodge, Montana.
Okay.
And so he's spending part of his time up there anyway.
If you had a demo job come your way, you'd come out of retirement, right?
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Well, yeah, probably.
I mean, I wouldn't expect you to do the drilling or anything, but, you know, be nice to keep going. So the drag lines, is that it was strictly the boom that you would shoot? I mean, I would think that all the everything else inside would be pretty difficult to try to shoot, right? I mean, the boom is all you're
Yeah,
really worried about. Once you lay that
right,
down, they can start getting at it with claws and
right.
cutters.
They and typically a lot of times, they'd already been in there ripping and tearing, you know. Uh, but the boom is pretty well anchored, obviously, and that's what you attack. And typically, you did that at the top of the house, and every one of them was a little bit different. You did some pre-cutting and things like that. So every one of them is a little bit different in how they're structured.
Now, I was told that usually, you correct me if I'm wrong, 80 to 90% of the strength is removed of any structure before the shape charge comes in.
Well, I don't know if it's that high. Probably depends on the structure.
Okay.
Yeah,
I said if it was 90%, that'd be too eerie. I mean, you'd be hearing a little too much creaking and
yeah. A lot of times taking X bracing out makes a lot of sense. The bracing and your cuts on the columns, if it's a structure, they're pretty small. They're just in critical areas where, and the angle and the timing. Timing again is a big item. You've got to make sure that things are out of the way, so when you turn other things loose, that it's got somewhere to go. It doesn't bind up.
Yeah, and the cut that you make, it doesn't pinch itself.
Right. Well, and that's one key too. Is in a column, I'll typically take about 6 foot out of a column, and then I put a kicker charge about behind that to throw that chunk of column out of there.
Oh, okay.
So it doesn't have a chance to sit back down. And your cuts are made at probably 6,000 degrees, and if you don't get that thing kicked out of there, it could sit back down on itself and maybe re-weld.
So you put like a base charge on the opposite side that you want that to move, and that's just a muscle charge. It's not doing any cutting or anything. It's just
nope. It's just throwing it out of the way.
And is that usually like a dynamite or?
Yeah. Usually half a stick of dynamite. It doesn't take a lot.
Not a lot. Okay.
No.
When I was a student, one of my master's classes under Dr. Wurzy was demolition. I think 351 demolition, and it was pretty amazing. We got to study all about it, and I would say a very large percentage of people in the explosives industry would like to do a professional demolition at least once in their life if they haven't already. It's kind of a nice level of blasting, and we got to one of the I think it was the final exam was how would we do the demolition of the St. Louis arch. And because it's such a unique structure, I mean, like you said, it's very nerve-wracking to do a 200-foot cooling tower, but eventually that's kind of I wouldn't say one of the easy ones, but once you get out of that center of gravity and you open that cut up, it should be going the way you want it to be going. But a very weird, I think it's a cardinal arch, that was something that he always wanted us to try to see. How would we do it? People always had they had their own braces. How would they shoot the key of the archway out? And how much would it go in for recycling? And so once a year, the people who worked at the archway and some people in the St. Louis government would start getting a bunch of phone calls about blowing up the St. Louis arch. and if it was a new employee, they'd always be a little excuse me, and this was post 9/11, so people were, they're like, oh, it's just those Rolla kids, It's
Yeah.
that same thing they do every year. Don't worry about it. They're engineering students. You can answer questions. It's okay. They're allowed to ask questions. We wouldn't directly say that we're trying to blow it up, but we'd be calling and asking a lot of odd structural questions that they don't normally get.
Right.
And so there was a little warning there. That was kind of funny. Now, did you what would you say was the most challenging of your demolition projects? If you can remember off the top of your head, is there any ones that were very odd to you, like having to land a smokestack in a very specific location? Or
Well, just last November, we took out a 205-foot head frame at a uranium mine, and it was within 30 feet of a big warehouse. Had probably 40-foot sidewalls on it, and they wanted to keep obviously the warehouse intact, and to compound it a little bit was that head frame was over a 26-foot diameter shaft, and they wanted to keep the shaft intact, so we couldn't hit it very hard vibration-wise. And you got to remember, all the structural steel, of course, is tied right back into the pedestals that tied into the concrete that's around the shaft.
Mhm.
So we had to use something I wasn't comfortable in doing was multiple delays, where typically I would have shot the entire front row at once, and that front row of columns, that is, because we had to delay those for vibration purposes, and so that was a little bit touchy, and then wrapping the charges so we didn't throw a lot of shrapnel into that building. That also presented a new set of problems.
So the wrapping helps with any frag that comes off of it. But is it similar to like blast mats, to where once you wrap it, you're kind of worried about access to it and messing with it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we of course used electronics, so we knew everything was awake and ready to go.
That's
so
good.
That's a bit of a peace of mind.
Now, was it, because for most guys in civil blasting, construction, or things like that, delays are your friends, but in demolition, delays are your enemy, right? You avoid delays. But I think because you had the availability of electronic detonators, was that delay a very minimal and accurate few milliseconds?
Yeah, we were down into the probably 7-8 millisecond range, just enough to disrupt the shock wave, if you will.
Mm-hmm. So almost within the same spectrum of time.
Right.
Just enough, and you did well, right? You wouldn't be bragging about it. The vibrations worked, right? Probably had more vibrations from that thing hitting the ground than you did.
Yeah, that was a low frequency hit, but it went well.
Now, was this for the drum program, where the government is footing the bill for fixing all of these Cold War era uranium mines that we've abandoned? It's like thousands.
I don't know where the money came from. It was one of the major underground mining companies that did it. So
I know that the people are using the Biden bucks. They're because there was agreed upon to fix and to reclaim all of these old uranium mines that we had used during this Cold War when we were stockpiling uranium.
Yeah, and it seems odd that we don't promote uranium as a fuel.
Yeah, that's I agree with you there. That's our somebody else's podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But
That
I
is.
could agree with you 100% on that.
Yeah.
So is when it comes to demolition blasting, what made so a lot of people have kind of wanted to get into that. I know that when I was a student, it was very difficult to find companies who are hiring interns. A lot of students obviously want to get access to that. Even myself professionally, I've had 2 professional demolitions that came down the line, and it always kind of seems like you're in the right place at the right time and someone happens to ask you if you can do it. How did your possibilities start like that? Did it start out with small things and then you built a report and a resume on that? Or were you working with someone else who already had that kind of experience? Because it's just such a niche field, and insurance is just killer on that kind of thing. And it's not like a quarry where you can have a little bit of boulders and some cap rock and adjust things. You got to get it right, and you got to get it right the first time. So,
and insurance has been the big thing, and that's why I did more of it under the blanket with Wesco, because they could get, writers and things like that, where me as an individual, forget it. They won't even hardly look at you.
Like, what were some of the benefits that you got out of this whole lifetime of blasting?
Actually, to me, the science, again, has been the most fascinating part. The demolition, quite frankly, is stressful, and I don't think a guy would want to live that way, day after day. There's a couple of families, the Loazos with CDI. They do a great job, and that is their thing. Mm-hmm. I would not even entertain doing a building of the size that some of those guys do. These have been just typically a man-made structure, in most cases out in the middle of nowhere or on a mine, to where you can completely control the environment. And so those are things you can do. But to get to the point, I've enjoyed more the science of the timing and rock blasting. It creates enough challenge everywhere, anytime, and being able to read the rock, know the difference, vibrations. That's the whole new part of our world that we have to live within. And so that's, we did a lot of blasting in Albuquerque. It's in new subdivisions, and you got to shoot the locations, you got to shoot the utilities in, and those create some real challenges for you, and those have been fun.
Now, has there been any significant moments in your career that you look back on and say, wow, what a community that was, and life-changing friendships kind of situation, or obviously it's kind of an inbred, everyone goes and works for other people, things like that, but there any things that come to your mind on that subject?
Well, yeah, I've developed lifelong friends. Even though some of us moved to different companies or different areas, you have a strong bond, especially when you've jointly taken on some of the challenges of a blast. The one thing I would say, over the last 20 years, last 25 years, is the professionalism of the blaster is much better than it's ever been. The days of the old cowboy of load her high and let her fly, those days are gone.
Mm-hmm.
And thank goodness the guys that were doing it are gone for the most part. I remember back in Spokane, that was electric sequential days, and it was drilled into you. You complete a series, you shun it off, right? And a couple of these old guys were, just leaving things open. They were pretty sloppy, and I remember telling one of them, I said, "Charlie, don't you think we ought to be shunting these?" And he says, "What's the matter, kid? You scared of this stuff?" And I told him, I said, "No, Charlie, I want to look just like you, missing 2 or 3 fingers and an eye,
Mm-hmm.
But those people are no longer part of our community now.
True.
And it's good.
Yeah. The old and the bold. There's old blasters and bold blasters, but there's no old bold blasters.
Nope.
Now, do you have anything regarding another one of the stories that we mentioned in the first episode of a lesson that you learned the hard way? Do you have another version of that, or? Like a safety share, one that really set in for you?
Well, a few years ago, and this is kind of on me, Wesco's got a terrific safety coordinator, Tim Wright, and he's been doing that for about, I think close to 20 years now. Does a fabulous job. He makes MSHA training enjoyable. Imagine that, And he's really pounded into our head. Well, I was on a blast out in California, and we brought in 2 guys out of the Las Vegas group to help. And the bulk truck out there where it's so hot, the augers get plugged up, or the AN won't flow to the auger, put it that way. And sure enough, we plugged. I was but bobbing the holes. And the young man jumped out of the truck and walked about 200 feet back to the support truck. And I thought, what in the world is he doing? We need to get up on top of that truck with a pole and beat that AN down. Well, he went back to that support truck, put on a harness, crawled up there and snapped off. And I thought, boy, new generation, but he did it right. Where back in the old days, myself included, probably would have just, run up the ladder with a pole and started poking.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought, this is a good thing. This is the new generation, and they are paying attention.
Very good point. Yeah, I've seen some people are even not getting on the bulk truck tied off unless there's someone else there, for the event that if they did fall off and the harness caught them, now there's actually someone there to help them, instead of they just sit there and hang like dead meat.
Right.
For could be 2 hours before someone gets to the silo or wherever, especially on a large mine site,
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you look out as a young man and say, this is the career I want to go into? Or was there ever a moment where you were like, fuck this, I want to be out of blasting? I want some, I know someone once told me, he goes, man, I just want to drive truck. He goes, I don't want any more stress. I just want to, I got enough stress at home. I got enough stress at something. I just put me in a haul truck and I'll just race truck. Did you ever have one of those moments where you felt like this wasn't for you?
Not really. I've worked in some other vocations and did this especially in the early days as a sideline, but I was always fascinated with it. I never got bored with it. Never got scared that I was going to get hurt or do something wrong. I was always, I always felt like I was in control of the variables, and I think that's important to have some degree of self-confidence and yet not be overconfident, because either one of them can hurt you.
It's a fine line.
Yeah.
Well, that's good that you didn't have one of those experiences.
No, we've actually had a couple of people over the years that they were good blasters, good lead blasters. Said, I don't want to do it anymore. And it just for the very reasons that you expressed there. I didn't totally understand that, but I appreciated their honesty.
Right. Yeah, I've met a lot of people so far who are damn good drillers, but they let their ticket expire and they're saying, I'm done with that, and that's even harder to deal with, at least they know that a straight hole matters, and you can make a good blaster look like a bad blaster real quick if you got some bad drilling. But it's nice to know that at least they're staying around and helping. But it's just a shame when some people just they don't want in the industry anymore. And is there anything you would say of how to retain people or how to keep people in the industry? That's a big subject here, and that's one of the reasons, like I said, we had this podcast, was keeping the knowledge of people like yourself, Mr. Strobbe. And
it takes a different breed of cat. You've got to be kind of fascinated with the science. I think that's always one thing that'll help. Training. I get people ready for the New Mexico State exam. I'm working on being approved, or I think I'm approved for the Colorado training. And what I see in class is New Mexico, of course, Dr. Kathy Amity Martin and myself have stiffened up, if you will, the New Mexico exam. There's about a third of it is math. And what we have found is, and we're talking about basic math, right? Mm-hmm. And it will take me 2 hours first day, and probably an hour and a half the second day to get these people comfortable in doing blasters math. And part of that is a failure of our schools. Part of it is these bulk trucks have a $25,000 computer in them to where all they do is punch in the depth of the hole. Stemming is already put in, the product's already put in, and they hit the green button. That's all they need to know.
Yeah, it's all automated.
And, yes, and that's ended up hurting us, I think, as a whole. And to try and get people to work the 3 basic formulas and to be able to work them backwards to create a good pattern, a burden and a spacing. How do you do that? And it takes some time. Plus the vibration issues now. You got to be able to calculate those to keep yourself out of jail.
Yeah, I think that it's for when it comes to math and mathematics, it is one of those, if you don't use it, you lose it. It takes a while to get back on the bike. You say, okay, I need to look at this, I need to look at that. I don't personally hold a blaster's ticket because I don't like being a part-time blaster. I think that a blaster, there's so many variables and things going on when it comes to clearances and who's in the area and what are your laws, what state are you in, what county are you in, that they're focusing so much on the team and what's going on that pattern that myself as a consultant and trainer, and I do investigations, help with design, but to be the blaster in charge and to be the person who holds the responsibility, there's so many other macro and micro factors that I think that's a full-time job. It's really hard to do that part-time, you know.
It is, and that's one of the reasons that the company I worked with, we very seldom set up our own seismographs, for the very reason, and I was kind of the author of that. I want my blaster worried about what's going on in his world, not setting up a damn seismograph. You know, you put that out to a third party, and it also gives you some more credibility if there is a complaint, that somebody else did it besides you. But the biggest issue is the blaster in charge. He shouldn't be doing a whole lot of the, working at one hole. He needs to be supervising everyone out there and be watching what's going on.
That's true. Very true.
And why don't we pay our blasters better than we do?
There you go. That's a very, very good point. Especially for the amount of risk that they take, right?
Yeah, it's their name on a legal document.
And yeah, I have no clue where to even start with something like that, though,
Yeah, there is a disparity. Absolutely.
For the risk, it's very weird. Well, I guess that's something for everyone to think about, for our listeners to think about, We're
absolutely.
Now, Joe, are you going to be coming to the 50th anniversary conference in Savannah this year?
I'm not sure. I'm a little bit, once you get to the point where someone else is not paying your bill,
it's expensive.
It's substantial, and I'm not sure that it would pay dividends for me to do that. I like Best in the West. I always
you make it up to that.
Yeah, that one's a good one.
That's good. So that's true. That I wonder if maybe there's like a. How long you been in the industry, Joe?
Actually, 50 plus.
So I would think that maybe like after the 50 year, there's like a discount or something for the.
Well, I joined SEE. It was SEE at the time in '90. So.
Did you ever get? See, I had the opportunity to get my lifetime membership to the ISEE. I don't think they do that anymore.
I don't know.
But that was I almost bit on that, and now I think I'm gonna pay a lot more after everything. But
yeah. Well, and at my age, a lifetime though, that I don't even buy green bananas. Okay.
No time to wait. Yeah.
No.
Seize the day there. That's true. Yeah. I don't blame you there. But okay, well, hopefully I can see you at Best in the West and meet you face to face there. And if you do get an opportunity, maybe people at ISE listening to this, maybe they're going to say, maybe they do. There does need to be some sort of a discount for people to attend at because you're right. I'm a small business. I own my business, and seeing the bill that comes out of that, just trying to network and get business is insane. It's definitely built for the big companies, to send people. And I'm a member of the emerging professionals, and I definitely would like to see, support there for small business as well as young members. It comes hand in hand too,
Absolutely.
But well, Joe, I really appreciate your time and you coming out here with us, and it's been a good experience. I thank you very much for the knowledge and sharing sharing your history.
Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Blast Report podcast. I want to thank the team at Blast Think for producing this show, and please follow along for more episodes in the future, and share this podcast with your colleagues so we can continue to honor our industry and the people in it. Be safe and have a blast.